Oh, hey, I've been reading some research on procrastination, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So stay with me. So, procrastination, who wants to be accused of that? Who wants to be called a procrastinator? It just doesn't sound pretty. And it has a really bad connotation in today's busy, everybody has to succeed, rat race world. So, this came to my consciousness a couple of weeks ago when a neighbor friend of mine asked me to go on a social engagement. I've known this guy for like maybe 6 years. And so I thought he knew me pretty well. And I just told him, I can't go. I've got a lot of work to catch up on. I've been busy procrastinating instead of getting it done. Well, he just cracked up laughing. Like a full belly laugh. And he said, I looked at him and I said, "What?" I was kind of offended. And he said, "You're a workaholic. You never procrastinate. You haven't procrastinated a day in your life." Well, obviously my friend doesn't know me very well, or I've done a really good job of faking workaholism. So I started thinking about this procrastination thing, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, no, I really am a procrastinator. I was kind of just throwing the word out there when I told him I couldn't go, but I really am. So I started reading up on it. I read a few psychology studies. They're mostly in the field of industrial psychology, which is kind of interesting, and some personality studies as well. So I read them today instead of paying bills and renewing my automobile registration or doing any real work. Isn't that procrastination? Anyway, today I'm going to share what I learned from those studies and from my own life history as a highly successful procrastinator. As a kid, I didn't care about grades. True confessions. I was happy enough to get B minus or C plus, anywhere in between, and the occasional C without the plus. I spent my time in the woods instead of doing homework, collecting nature and watching the clouds and painting. My father calmed my mother's fears about my B minuses and C pluses by dubbing me a self-starter who would eventually find what she loves to do. That was my dad. Later in college, I got mostly B's and B pluses with the occasional A in something that I really loved. And isn't that how we choose a major? It's the thing we get A's in. It was for me anyway. So back to today. We'll get back to my history in a minute. Back to today. From the studies I read, I learned procrastinators are comfortable with the kind of pressure over which they have control. And that is so totally me. I'm sure that I'm a procrastinator, but we'll get back to that in a minute. So having control over the pressure is huge. Procrastinators can handle that. What they really can't handle very well is the kind of pressure that other people put on them. And they're always thinking about what they have to do while they're playing instead of working. Their brains are in the background are just buzzing about that thing that they need to do. And it's not a sort of a nervous buzz. It's more just a thoughtful buzz. Like, I know I need to write a chapter in this thing, or I know I need to do my YouTube channel. So my brain is back there doing that thing that it does. The American screenwriter Aaron Sorkin said about this, he said, let me think, I read it today in something I was reading. He said, wait, it's coming. He said, you call it procrastination, I call it thinking. I love that. When I saw that, that's when I really decided I needed to just share this stuff with you. So another thing about procrastinators, they are time insensitive. They're global rather than linear thinkers. They're not on a time clock. Surprise, surprise. They are also idealistic and perfectionistic. In fact, it's that perfectionism that can sometimes stop them from actually pressing the complete button after they get a job done. They're unwilling to do something just because it has to be done, or submit a homework assignment just because it's due. They would rather make sure it's perfect and then submit it late and get the B. I also learned that there are degrees of procrastination. According to a study that I read today by industrial psychologist Adam Grant at the University of Pennsylvania, there are 3 types of workers. There are precrastinators, I'll tell you about them in a minute, moderate procrastinators, and chronic procrastinators. Now, precrastinators, according to Dr. Grant, are those people who just start worrying way before the deadline, way before the due date, and they just get the job done, and it's done. And it, according to his study, it might not be fabulous. It's not as good, maybe, as what the moderate procrastinators produce. The study demonstrated, in fact, that moderate procrastinators are 16% more productive than procrastinators who worry and get the job done early, and chronic procrastinators who maybe don't get the job done at all because they never start. So all 3 of these groups, according to him, are doubters, or they have 3 ways of managing doubt, we might say. Self-doubters who start and finish early to avoid the fear of being late, which I already talked about, and these are the precrastinators. There are also self-doubters who become paralyzed by fear and don't start at all, and these are the chronic procrastinators. And then there are the self-doubters, which I think I fall into this category, I hope, who question the validity or importance of their idea. And these are the moderate procrastinators. And it turns out that their greatest fear is doing nothing at all. It also turns out that what their fear brings up is caution and deeper thinking and rethinking and rehashing and checking their details and making sure of the validity of their ideas. So that's right, these tend to be problem solver type people. And not just any problem, but important problems. And another perk of this variety of self-doubt is that it leads to just the right amount of procrastination, that moderate place in the bell curve of procrastination, during which ideas are fleshed out, formalized, trialed, tweaked, and generally delayed until they're perfect, or nearly so, because we do have some deadlines. Examples of these people are Leonardo da Vinci. Of course, he's an example of everything these days, right? But seriously, Leonardo da Vinci had tremendous dissatisfaction. I know this is true because I used to be a student of art history as well. Tremendous dissatisfaction with his early artwork. He even wrote about this in his journals, which led to his work in optics, which both dramatically improved his art, as we see from things like the Mona Lisa, and led to numerous inventions such as the telescope, and it also participated in the early printing press. And the incomparable Martin Luther King is another, whose famous words, "I have a dream," were written on the 12th hour, literally, on the pulpit, whilst waiting for his turn to speak. He literally turned over his speech and started writing new ideas about what he was going to say. It also turns out that procrastination varies depending upon the actual task. So there are self-selected versus assigned tasks. God knows I never liked homework. There are deadlines versus no deadlines. And there are planned versus unplanned tasks. And there are mundane, day-to-day tasks versus the more creative tasks. So, getting back to me, someone like myself who does most things at the last minute can complete 2 master's degrees simultaneously, then roll right into a 4-year doctoral program and wrap it up in just 2 years. But as my father predicted, I didn't take the traditional route. After completing an undergraduate degree in psychology, my mother said, "You can't do anything with a bachelor's in psychology." She didn't actually talk like that, but all mothers do online, right? She said, "You can't actually do anything with a bachelor's in psychology. You need to have a master's as a minimum," I think she said. But I didn't want to have another assignment in my whole life at that point. I was done with assignments. I was done with final exams and all of that stuff. So my father said, "You better just go to work for yourself." And my father had been self-employed my whole life, so I had a good example of that. So I did. I started a school. This was way back, 1984. I know I'm so much older than I look. I ran a cognitive psychology study on literacy and developed the phonographics reading method. I trained thousands of teachers around the English-speaking world, wrote 2 books on literacy development, and I developed an online course in 2004 before there was such a thing as online courses. So, how did a procrastinator do all that? How did that happen? Important question, right? If you're watching this, you either have a procrastinator in your life or you think, "Ooh, maybe I'm a procrastinator." So this is an important question. How do you succeed as a procrastinator? So the simple answer is that I had a question. Why are we able to teach everyone to read at my school? This is back in the late 80s. When 40% of school children nationally are failing to learn to read. That was my burning question. And wanting answers to questions is what motivates procrastinators to stop procrastinating and start moving. 10 years later, fast forward, after my father had passed away at only 63 years, I wanted more answers. What's the connection between illness and the mind? That was my question. Boom, a master's in health psychology. Then only 4 months into the first master's, I had another question. What's the connection between diet and symptoms of autism? At that point, my ex-husband and I had adopted a young child, my youngest, with autism. And there she was in my world. So, boom, another degree, this time in another master's degree, this time in nutrition. I finished both simultaneously. I call them my twins. But after the twins, and now having started another school, this one for children with disabilities, I still had questions. So I had to just stop procrastinating. And it's funny how questions lead to more questions. What's the connection between parental avoidance and the frequency of intensity and trajectory of symptoms of autism? boom, a doctorate. And this one I did in 2 years, which normally would take 4 years. It was a 4-year doctorate, and I got it done in 2. Why? Because I wanted the answer. And there's another reason too. And this takes us to the last piece of information about procrastinators. The thing that really motivates procrastinators to finish a project is the next project. So they're motivated to start by the question, but they're motivated to finish by having yet another question and another project. So starting projects is our joy in life. Finishing is okay too, as long as we have a new project to follow. So for those of you who've been beating yourself up about procrastinating, my advice is just own it. It's cool to procrastinate. It's as long as you're good at it. And for those of you who already knew you were procrastinators before you watched this video, now you have some really cool data to share with friends rather than paying your bills, renewing your auto registration, or doing your homework. Yeah, for me, the government stuff, like all those forms you have to fill out and things that you have to, especially when you're self-employed, there's so much paperwork. CEUs, things like that. Procrastinate. But in the back of your mind, you know what you're thinking about. You're thinking about your next novel. You're thinking about your next big project. You're thinking about, what are you thinking about? Put it in the comments section. Tell me what you're procrastinating about today, and we'll talk. I hope this was helpful. I really enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed procrastinating while I was doing it about the other things that I need to do. So I will see you this Wednesday right here on my YouTube channel for my sneak peek, midweek sneak peek as to what we're going to talk about next Sunday. See you soon.